What if the gift you cherish most was forged in a furnace you never chose? What if the radar that hears a sigh before it becomes a storm, tastes unease before words arrive, first grew to keep you safe rather than to make you kind? Imagine learning that the feeling you've used to shelter others once sheltered you. This key is unsettling, yet it opens a door. The empath, in depth psychology, is the child who learned love through pain. Picture a small body in a large house where the weather shifts without warning. A cup lands a little too hard. A door closes a fraction too fast and the air tightens. The child does not know the vocabulary of attachment or projection. Their nervous system learns it by heart. Breath becomes barometer, muscles become antennae, and attention sharpens into a blade. Love exists, but it drips through conditions. Be pleasing, be quiet, be useful. To be fully oneself seems dangerous, so the self learns to hide. No one explains this. The lesson is pre-verbal, memorized in bone and fascia. A look becomes a law. A silence becomes a sentence. The body maps the house like an astronomer maps stars. This corridor predicts thunder. That room smells like winter. Years later, people call this sensitivity a gift. They admire how you read a room, how you anticipate needs. They praise the music and forget to ask about the drum. They don't see the childhood rehearsals, the hours spent scanning the horizon for a change in light. Jung drew on myth to describe such patterns, often invoking Chiron, the immortal healer pierced by a wound that would not close. From the impossibility of healing himself, Chiron learned how to tend the pain of gods and heroes. The empath knows this story without footnotes. Denied permission to feel fully, they became expert at feeling for others. The bruise became a lantern, but it also erased a border. What looked like sainthood often began as strategy. To be safe, carry the weather for the room. Here identity wobbles on an abyss of questions. If my generosity began in fear, is it generosity at all? If I stop carrying everyone's sadness, will there be anything left of me? The mind reaches for either-or answers, yet Jung's work suggests a third. Hold the opposites without collapse. Your empathy arose as protection and remains a capacity for intimacy. It is both wound and organ. To deny the pain falsifies the gift. To deny the gift falsifies the pain. Wholeness begins when both are spoken. Listen to the questions that have shadowed your kindness. Do I give because I choose or because I fear what follows refusal? Do I notice others because I'm present or because I have left myself? When the difference blurs, resentment accumulates like silt in a riverbed. The current slows, the water grows heavy. You call it tiredness, but beneath it is the ache of a self asked to disappear too many times. The antidote is not withdrawal from love, it is reunion with yourself inside love. Individuation, the slow, courageous work of becoming a whole person, begins with a radical permission. I am allowed to exist even when someone else is unhappy. This sounds simple, it is revolutionary. The body, trained to equate safety with compliance, needs new evidence. Start where your tissues can hear you. Let the breath arrive. Name what is true. I feel a tightening. I want space. I fear rejection. I am still here. Naming does not create conflict, it ends confusion. Clarity is a warm room for the inner child. From that room, memory unspools. You recall how you learned to forecast weather, how early love sounded half lullaby, half alarm. You see the child walking halls with a bucket, mopping up other people's storms before they stain the carpet. You forgive that child for surviving brilliantly. Then you offer what was once withheld, an invitation to set the bucket down. You do not have to purchase love with labor. You are allowed to be loved for being, not for service. Anger often returns here, not as wildfire, but as pilot light. The portion of you that was silenced refuses burial. In Jung's terms, the shadow begins to speak. Its language is boundary, its memory is accurate. It does not want revenge, it wants recognition. When you let that flame burn in a safe hearth, it becomes clarity. Here is what I can give. Here is what I cannot. Here's where I end and you begin. Empathy, once a flood, learns the banks that make a river. So the doorway stands open and you stand in it. On one side is the old bargain, vanish a little and be praised for goodness. On the other is a new covenant, remain visible and let love become honest. Both roads cost something. Only one returns you to yourself. Step with courage. The child, who learned love through pain, is not a diagnosis but a beginning. And beginnings, however dark, are thresholds to clear radiance. The sun knows where the horizon is, even before you do. What if the talent you're praised for, the way you feel a room shift before anyone speaks, was learned with your back against a wall? What if anticipation was not intuition at first, but insurance? Imagine a childhood where the temperature of love changed with every footstep in the hall. Imagine a life built around listening for weather no one else admits they're making. This is how the labyrinth begins, not on the day you were born sensitive, but on the night you discovered that safety required reading the air faster than anyone else. In houses where affection is rationed, a child becomes a barometer. A cup set a little too hard means silence is safer than joy. A sigh at the table instructs the spine to straighten, the voice to soften, the appetite to retreat. Care becomes choreography. Measure the room, erase the troubling parts of yourself. Deliver comfort before it's requested. The child learns that belonging is conditional, and conditions multiply like corridors. Move carefully, or the light goes out. What seems like an extraordinary gift later, an ability to hear the unsaid, to notice the micro-expression that betrays hurt, began as a nervous system practicing acrobatics. The body memorized 1,000 tiny cues to avoid 1,000 larger collapses. Praise arrives in adulthood. You're so intuitive, so caring, so attuned, but the medal hangs from a bruise. You are celebrated for dissolving quickly, for becoming what the room needs. Few ask what it cost to stop needing anything yourself. Jung called the psyche's return to old rooms a compulsion to repeat. When pain is unresolved, the theater restages itself with new actors. Lovers who withdraw unless appeased, friends who bless generosity but never reciprocity, workplaces that confuse burnout with devotion. The empath obeys the script without, realizing it was written by a frightened child. They give more, carry more, and wait for the exit that never appears. Each turn promises daylight. Each passage is another loop. Projection thickens the maze. Because the exiled self cannot be met directly, it is searched for indirectly, in people who seem to need saving. The unconscious whispers, "If I can make this person whole, the past will heal." The Redeemer archetype fastens its cloak. Your worth is measured by how much you can absorb. Yet the ledger never balances. The more you rescue, the more you vanish. The more you vanish, the more rescuers you attract. Consider a dream, an endless hallway of mirrors. In each pane, another face appears, parent, sibling, teacher, lover, each pleading, scolding, or weeping. You run to soothe them and find the glass cold. After a long while, a hairline crack crosses one mirror, and behind the fracture a small, unsteady image appears. You. The dream teaches without a lecture. Until the mirror breaks, you cannot be found. Until projection shatters, you are only reflections. There is no outer exit from this labyrinth, only an inner turning. The first pivot is consent. Ask quietly and often, do I consent to this role? Do I consent to the rule that my value equals my usefulness? Consent returns choice to the present moment. Sometimes the choice is micro, 3 breaths before you. Answer the sentence, let me get back to you. The brave, unadorned no, then comes discernment. Is this feeling mine or yours? The body can learn to sort with kindness. Place a hand where anxiety shouts and name what you sense. If the sensation eases when you imagine stepping back, it may belong to the other. If it intensifies when you imagine abandoning yourself, it is yours and deserves care. Sorting is not abandonment, it is accuracy. Without it, generosity becomes leakage. Reparenting anchors the turns. Offer the child within the 2 graces they were denied, steadiness and delight. Steadiness says, I will not punish you for needing. Delight says, your presence is welcome even when you bring nothing but yourself. When these voices repeat, the labyrinth's walls thin. Conditions lose authority. Love remembers its original shape. Spring water, not currency. Expect the minotaur to protest. The parts of the psyche that fed on your overgiving will roar. Some bonds depend on your disappearance. They will name your boundaries betrayal. Healthy. Love can withstand your edges. Unhealthy love worships your erasure. Let the latter fall. Loss here is a map to better ground. What waits beyond the maze is not indifference but proportion. You will still feel the room, but your feelings will have a home address. You will still give, but from a well that refills. You will still care, but not as collateral. When the old corridors call, you will recognize them and choose another way with care. Stand at the center and listen for a question rising like a rope thrown from above. If love no longer required you to disappear, who would you be? The answer is the thread. Hold it, walk. What if the part of you you've hidden, the anger you apologize for, the hunger you deny, the grief you postpone, is not a flaw to fix, but a door you were meant to open? Imagine that the force you've used to hold those feelings underwater is the very energy you need to breathe freely. Jung named the buried cargo of the psyche the shadow. For the empath, that shadow is packed with the contraband of childhood, needs that were forbidden, truths that were dangerous, vitality that had nowhere safe to go. When a child learns that tears provoke distance, that no invites punishment, that wanting too much makes love disappear, the psyche performs a miracle of survival. It hides what would cost too much to show. The body becomes a vault. The face learns diplomacy. The voice edits itself mid-sentence. But what is stored is not destroyed. The unconscious keeps perfect books. Debt accrues as symptoms. Exhaustion sleep cannot touch. Resentment that exceeds the moment. Kindness that curdles into anger. Repetition enters like a tide. Unmet needs return disguised as projects, partners to rescue, friends to manage, workplaces to fix. Each has the same script: overfunction, overfeel, overstay. You promise this time will be different, and the orbit tightens until you are again the absorber, the reliable one, the saint who never registered to be canonized. This is not moral failure. It is the locked material seeking expression, the old pattern returning as fate. Here the archetype of the wounded healer steps forward. Chiron could not mend his own wound, yet from that wound came medicine. The empath's wound is a boundary thinned so much it cannot shelter a self. Without contact, with shadow, the empath heals by bleeding. Time, sleep, margins offered a sponge. With contact, the same sensitivity grows edges and becomes presence, the capacity to sit near pain without abandoning one's own center. Dreams speak in images that outrun explanation. A common dream. You cradle a broken bird while the building burns. You refuse to leave until the bird is safe. It dissolves into smoke. You are left coughing, empty-handed. These scenes do not scold. They translate. They say your devotion is beautiful and it is drowning you. The first movement of integration is permission to feel what was barred. Anger is not an enemy. It is orientation, the heat that says, I exist and have a perimeter. Grief is not weakness. It is proof that love touched you. Desire is not sin. It is the compass pointing toward a life proportioned for you. When these forces are owned, they stop hijacking your choices from underground. Practice begins in the E. Instant guilt surges after a boundary. Say guilt is an old alarm, not a current verdict. When anxiety flares around someone else's discomfort, ask, is this mine to carry? If no, let the weather pass through you. If yes, attend to yourself first, then decide what offering is clean. Clean offerings do not require you to disappear. They do not mortgage tomorrow to pay for today's peace. Projection is the trickster at the edge of this work. The more you reclaim, the clearer others become. You stop reading your disowned need in their eyes. You notice when compassion slides into a bid for control. As projection withdraws, intimacy brightens. People are allowed to be themselves, not stages for your unhealed script. This is not detachment, it is love without theater. Some will call this selfish. Let them. In Jung's language, you are shifting the center of gravity back to the self, not the costume of ego, but the living nucleus that coordinates a whole life. From this center, saying no is not aggression, it is hygiene. From this center, saying yes is not appeasement, it is consent. Paradoxically, relationships deepen because your presence is trustworthy. You are not promising what your body cannot afford. Don't expect backlash from within. The psychic economy built around overgiving will protest. Old voices will recite the catechism. You are only good when you are useful. You are safe only when you agree. Meet them with a new liturgy. I am good when I am true. I am safe when I am whole. Repetition matters. Pathways thicken where attention travels. Each loyal return to yourself lays mycelium under the forest of your days. Sometimes the shift arrives as quiet as a key turning. You notice you did not rush to fix the tension in a conversation. You felt the pull and stayed in your chair. You slept and did not apologize. The shadow is not conquered, it is befriended. Its power is borrowed for building. So ask yourself now with tenderness and authority, Which part of you is still in the basement holding its breath for permission? Go down with a lantern. Tell that one the truth you needed long ago. Nothing you feel disqualifies you from love. Bring them upstairs, let the air change. Let the house be yours. What if the door you've begged others to open was unlatched from the inside all along? What if the permission you chased in every smile and silence was your own permission waiting to be spoken? The empath's body eventually refuses the old bargain. Fatigue arrives like a messenger. Dreams grow insistent. Kindness tastes like chalk when it is traded for belonging. This is the threshold, the passage where survival through self-erasure ends and love through freedom begins. Crossing it is quiet, yet seismic within, the first honest yes to yourself. Boundaries are not walls against love, they are the architecture that makes love possible. A boundary says, "This is me, that is you." Without that line, compassion collapses into fusion, and fusion ferments into resentment. Jung called this line the first contour of individuation, the recognition that the self is a nucleus, not a mirror. To the empath, such recognition can feel dangerous because the old law equated selfhood with abandonment. Yet boundary is precisely the channel through which intimacy flows, because only a whole self can meet another without disappearing. Guilt often erupts the moment a boundary is set. Hear it clearly. Guilt here is the echo of a childhood commandment, not proof of wrongdoing. The psyche, trained to equate self-assertion with threat, rings its alarm. When guilt whispers, "You are selfish," answer with truth, "I am permitted to exist." When fear hisses, "They will leave," answer with courage, "If love requires my disappearance, it is not love." Each reply cuts through inherited belief and teaches the nervous system that safety can include you. Individuation asks for reparenting. The mother archetype has two faces, devouring and nurturing. Many empaths met the first and must now practice the second toward themselves. Reparenting means consistent warmth. I will not abandon you when you feel anger. I will not silence you when you need rest. I will not trade your truth for anyone's comfort. The father archetype provides structure, steady rhythms, clean limits, guardianship of time. Held together, these inner parents create a home where the child within can exhale. Projection must be withdrawn like a tide. For years, the empath saw need everywhere because their own need lived in exile. Now the work is to notice the urge to rescue and ask, whose urgency is this? If the answer is mine, tend it. If the answer is theirs, return it. This discernment breaks the spell of the Redeemer archetype, the fantasy that suffering must purchase the world's salvation. You are not a currency. Your worth is not measured by how much sorrow you can carry. Dreams confirm the shift. Where? Once you drowned, now the ocean appears with a shore. Where once the mirror held only other faces, your own image steadies. You may walk through a burning house and discover the flames bow away from your breath. You might dive to the seabed expecting to suffocate and instead find a pearl warm as a heartbeat in your palm. Such images are weather reports from the soul, signaling that the psyche is reorganizing around a center that includes you. The practical alchemy is simple. Pause before the reflex to fix. Breathe until you can feel the floor. Name the sensation, without judgment. There is grief. There is anger. There is the urge to vanish. Then choose a response that includes you. Sometimes inclusion means leaving the room. Sometimes it means asking for time. Sometimes it means a clean, sturdy no. The point is not perfection, but consciousness, an end to automatic sacrifice. Each conscious act returns gold to the treasury of the self. Expect resistance. The shadow does not vacate its throne quietly, and neither do those who benefited from your boundarylessness. Some will accuse you of becoming cold. Others will call you selfish. Remember, accusations are often projections encountering a limit. Real bonds adapt to truth. Only false bonds demand your erasure. The loneliness that follows is not punishment but initiation. The open field where a new center roots. Trust that solitude is soil, not exile. In that fertile quiet, the self grows sturdy legs. Sovereignty does not cancel tenderness. It ripens. When you are no longer bargaining for belonging, generosity becomes clean. You can listen without absorbing, help without hemorrhaging, and love without leaving yourself behind. This is not detachment. It is devotion with a spine. The empath who crosses the threshold does not feel less. They feel honestly, and so they choose when to give, how to stay, and when to step away. Their yes regains its music because their no finally has rhythm. So ask yourself now, which law must be broken for your life to begin? What small, defiant act would announce that your existence is not negotiable? The lock is unlatched on the inside. All that remains is the hand that turns it. Imagine waking in a room once filled with other people's voices and hearing, for the first time, your own. It is not loud. It is clear. What if love no longer demanded your disappearance? What if tenderness did not require you to bleed for it? Consider a life where empathy is not a leash but a lantern. Light you carry rather than a fire that consumes you. This is the horizon that appears when an empath moves from survival to sovereignty. Everything feels newly possible. The sovereign empath does not abandon feeling. They restore order to it. Sensitivity becomes an instrument tuned to two notes, self and other. They can receive another's grief without confusing it for their own. They can enter pain without losing the way back. Because their boundaries hold, their presence nourishes rather than depletes. People often describe them as calm, vivid and real. They give by choice, not compulsion. They rest without guilt. They refuse the old exchange rate where love costs. The self. This clarity is not a final destination, it is a practiced rhythm. Growth moves in spirals, not straight lines. There will be days when the old reflex returns, when you reach to fix what was never yours, when guilt surges after a small no, when the mirror clouds again. These moments are not failures, but invitations to repetition with awareness. Turn toward the body. Name what is yours. Offer yourself the warmth you once sought outside. Begin again gently, the way a musician returns to the note. Sovereignty has a cost, and it is worth paying. Some bonds will strain when you stop carrying the weight of the room. Certain dynamics cannot survive the presence of your center. They will call it selfishness because it no longer serves their convenience. Let them fall. What remains becomes trustworthy precisely because it respects your edges. In time, you find companions who practice reciprocity, People who can receive your no without withdrawing love, and meet your yes without entitlement. There is also grief for the years spent disappearing, for the tenderness you gave that was never met, for the child who learned to map the weather of others while a storm brewed within. Allow this grief to move. It is sacred water washing the foundation of the new life. Paradoxically, as you honor the sorrow, gratitude widens beside it. Gratitude for the sensitivity that kept you alive, and for the courage that now turns that sensitivity toward freedom. Seen from above, your personal story touches a wider pattern. Cultures often mistake sacrifice for love and call martyrdom virtue. The empath who individuates challenges this myth by living a different equation: compassion plus boundary equals truth. As you withdraw projections and refuse compulsory caretaking, you loosen an ancient knot, not only in yourself, but in the fabric that binds families and communities. Wholeness is private and political at once. It alters the field around you. How, then, is love practiced from this place? Quietly, steadily. You ask cleaner questions. Is this mine or theirs? Where did I leave myself in this conversation? What promise am I making with my silence, and do I consent to it? You choose repairs that do not require betrayal. You decline roles that reward your absence. Your generosity grows roots because it is anchored in consent. The child within learns that safety and aliveness can share the same room. Myth helps us remember. Chiron's wound becomes wisdom only when carried consciously. Persephone becomes queen not by remaining underground, but by knowing the seasons of descent and return. The image of crucifixion ripens into resurrection when suffering is no longer a badge, but a lesson. Alchemy names the same motion: solve, et coagula, dissolve and rebind. The materials of your pain are not discarded. They are recomposed into a shape that can hold light. Perhaps tonight you will dream differently. A hall of mirrors, once crowded with faces, now reveals your own. An ocean that used to drown you now bears you toward shore. A child who waited at the edge of the burning house steps forward, places the warm pearl in your open hand and says, "Keep this." The pearl is the self, small at first but luminous, weighty in ways that reorient everything you touch. Stand here a moment and listen. The old law claimed that love is earned by pain. You have tested that law and found it false. Let a new one take root. Love is the radiance of a self no longer at war with itself. Walk the unknown road. Choose the bond that honors your edges. Speak the quiet no that protects your yes. Become the adult of wholeness you were meant to be, and let your empathy become freedom in the shape of care for you and others.